It starts with a scream, sharp, desperate, and utterly out of place in the polished quiet of an upscale Manhattan evening. A little girl's voice cuts through the rustle of falling leaves and the distant hum of city traffic, crying out words that would stop even the busiest billionaire in his tracks. "My mom is inside." If that sentence made your chest tighten, just wait. Because what unfolds next isn't just a rescue, it's a reckoning. Before we go further, hit subscribe, drop a like, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. It helps more people find stories that matter. That night, the autumn air carried more than just the scent of damp pavement and distant coffee shops. It carried fear, hope, and the kind of raw human urgency that doesn't knock, it shatters. Richard Blackwood, 36 years old and worth more than the GDP of several small nations, was walking his usual route from his penthouse office to his Fifth Avenue residence, his Italian leather shoes clicking with the same precision that had built his global empire. Every step reflected discipline, control, predictability, the very architecture of his success. But then came the scream, and in that instant, the rhythm of his perfectly ordered world fractured. "Mommy's in there. Please, somebody help." The voice was young, trembling, and laced with a terror no child should ever know. Richard froze. His steel-gray eyes scanned the shadowed alley between two luxury boutiques, where most men of his stature would have quickened their pace or discreetly dialed security. But Richard had learned long ago that turning away from suffering wasn't a privilege, it was a failure, even for someone with unlimited resources. He stepped toward the sound, drawn not by obligation, but by something deeper, something buried beneath decades of boardroom victories and calculated risks. There, next to a large commercial dumpster, stood a little girl, blonde hair catching the amber glow of a street lamp, fists pounding uselessly against cold metal, tears carving tracks through the dirt on her cheeks. Her clothes were clean but rumpled, as if she'd been running for her life. "Hey there, sweetheart," Richard said gently, crouching to her level. "What's wrong? Where are your parents?" She looked up at him with eyes the color of summer skies now clouded by panic. "She's in there," the girl whispered, voice cracking. "My mommy. She's hiding from the bad man. But I can't get her out. Please, mister, you have to help." Richard's first reaction was doubt. A grown woman hiding in a dumpster? It sounded like a child's misunderstanding, maybe a game gone too far. But then he heard it, the raw, unfiltered terror in her voice, the absolute conviction in her trembling body. This wasn't imagination. This was survival. "What's your name, honey?" he asked softly. "Emma," she sobbed. "Emma Patterson. And my mommy is Sarah. She's 35, and she's really scared." The man with the loud voice made her hide. He said terrible things, mister. Really terrible things that made mommy cry. Richard's heart ached. "Emma, sweetheart, are you sure your mother is actually inside there?" The girl's response was immediate, fierce, and heartbreaking. "She is in there. I saw her climb in. She told me to run if the bad man came back. But I can't leave her. I won't leave her." In that moment, Richard saw something he hadn't encountered in years. Pure, unguarded truth. He'd built his fortune on reading people, on spotting lies, half-truths, manipulations. But Emma radiated authenticity. "Okay, Emma," he said, standing slowly. "Let me look." As he approached the dumpster, a smell hit him, not just rotting food or wet cardboard, but something more human. Sweat, tears, the metallic tang of fear. His hands shook slightly as he gripped the heavy lid. "Ma'am, if you're in there, please don't be afraid. I'm here to help." A muffled sound answered him, neither sob nor gasp, but unmistakably human. He lifted the lid, and what he saw inside stole his breath. Curled in the far corner, half buried under restaurant waste, was a woman. Her once elegant clothes were torn and stained, her auburn hair matted with grime and tears. But it was her eyes that shattered him wide, hollow, filled with a despair that spoke of months, maybe years, of living in terror. "Oh, my God," Richard whispered, voice breaking. "Ma'am, Please let me help you out." When the woman Sarah looked up at him, something shifted in her expression. Not recognition of him personally, but a flicker of hope. In his face, in his tone, she sensed safety. "Emma," she whispered hoarsely. "I'm here, Mommy," the girl cried, stepping forward. "This nice man is going to help us." Richard extended his hand. After a heartbeat of hesitation, Sarah took it. Her grip was surprisingly strong, despite her trembling. As he helped her climb out, he saw the bruises, not the kind from fists, but the deeper, invisible wounds of psychological abuse, the kind that don't show on x-rays, but carve scars into the soul. "Thank you," she breathed, pulling Emma into a crushing embrace. "Thank you so much." Richard watched them hold each other, and something inside him cracked open. This wasn't charity. This was connection. It stirred memories he'd locked away of being 7 years old, hiding in a closet while his own father raged, while his mother tried to shield him with her body and silence. He'd spent decades burying that boy, building walls of success and control to keep the past at bay. But now, standing in a garbage-strewn alley with a mother and daughter clinging to each other like survivors of a shipwreck, he felt that boy stir again. "Who did this to you?" he asked quietly. Sarah's face went pale. "My ex-boyfriend, Marcus. He gets so angry. The things he says, the way he looks at me when he's drinking." She couldn't finish. "Where is he now?" "I don't know. Maybe still looking. Maybe at his apartment, getting more drunk, more furious." Her voice broke. "I couldn't think of anywhere else to hide. I know how this looks, hiding in garbage like some kind of animal. But I couldn't let him hurt Emma." Richard looked at Emma, and in her eyes he saw his younger self, small, scared, watching helplessly as someone he loved was broken piece by piece. "Listen to me very carefully," he said, his voice shifting into the tone that had closed billion-dollar deals and commanded boardrooms. "Both of you are safe now. I'm going to make sure of that. But you don't understand." Sarah started. "I understand more than you know," Richard interrupted, surprised by the steel in his own voice. "What I don't understand is why the system meant to protect people like you keeps failing so completely." Just then, heavy footsteps echoed from the street, unsteady, aggressive. Sarah went rigid. "He found us," she whispered. A slurred voice followed, thick with alcohol and rage. Sarah, I know you're out here somewhere. You stupid." Richard didn't wait. In one fluid motion, he stepped between the alley entrance and the mother-daughter pair, his posture shifting from concerned stranger to protective guardian. Years of martial arts training, once just a hobby, now felt like preparation for this exact moment. "Emma, take your mother behind that dumpster," he said calmly, never taking his eyes off the alley mouth. "Stay low. Stay quiet." "But what about you?" Sarah asked, voice trembling. "You don't know what Marcus is capable of." "I'm about to find out," Richard replied grimly. Marcus appeared like a storm, given human form, tall, broad, face flushed with drink and fury, eyes bloodshot and wild. When he spotted Richard standing calmly in the alley, his expression twisted from rage to suspicion. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded, swaying slightly. "And where is she?" "Where's Sarah?" "My name is Richard Blackwood," Richard said evenly, noting the flicker of recognition in Marcus's eyes. Even drunk, the man knew power when he heard it. "Good. I think you need to go home and sleep off whatever you've been drinking." Marcus let out a harsh laugh. "Richard Blackwood, the billionaire? You've got to be kidding me." His gaze swept the alley. "What's a guy like you doing here? Unless," his eyes narrowed, "unless that lying witch called you." "She's not here," Richard lied smoothly. "And even if she was, I don't think she wants to see you right now." "You don't know anything about us," Marcus snarled, stumbling closer. "She's my girlfriend. That kid's practically my kid. I've been taking care of them for 2 years. And this is how she repays me, running away like some kind of... Is that what you call terrorizing a woman and child?" Richard's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. Behind the dumpster, Sarah held Emma close, heart hammering so loudly she feared it would give them away. Marcus's face darkened. "You don't know what you're talking about, rich boy. Sarah's got problems, mental problems. She makes things up, tells lies. Sometimes she needs to be reminded what's real." "And you're the one who reminds her?" Richard asked, his calm more terrifying than any shout. "Someone has to keep her grounded. Someone has to make sure she doesn't fill that kid's head with nonsense." Richard felt a cold familiarity settle in his gut. He'd heard these exact justifications before, from his own father, the same twisted logic that dressed control as love and fear as discipline. "Let me ask you something, Marcus," he said conversationally. "When you look at Emma, what do you see?" The question threw Marcus off. What kind of question is that? A simple one. When you look at that little girl, what do you see? Marcus squinted, struggling through the alcohol fog. "I see a kid who needs guidance, structure, someone to teach her how the world really works." "And when she looks at you, what do you think she sees?" This time, Marcus answered faster. "Someone who cares. Someone trying to protect her from her mother's crazy ideas." Richard nodded slowly. "You know what I think she sees? The same thing I saw when I looked at my father." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus's eyes narrowed. "Fear," Richard continued quietly. "Pure, absolute fear. The kind that follows a child into adulthood. The kind that makes them question if they're even worth protecting." "You don't know anything about—" "I know everything about it," Richard cut in, voice now carrying the full weight of his authority, his pain, and his purpose. "I know what it's like to watch someone you love disappear piece by piece, because someone who claims to care is slowly destroying their spirit." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "She's not destroyed. She's just dramatic. Everything's a big production with her." "Is that what you call making a grown woman so terrified she hides in a dumpster with her child?" Richard pressed. "She chose to hide there." Marcus exploded. "I never told her to. She chose the safest place she could find," Richard corrected. "Think about that, Marcus. The safest place a mother could imagine for herself and her daughter was inside a dumpster. What does that tell you about the danger she was running from?" For a fleeting second, something flickered across Marcus's face, shame, doubt, but it vanished, replaced by renewed anger. "You think because you have money you can play hero? Wave your wallet and fix everything? I think I can make sure Sarah and Emma are somewhere safe tonight," Richard said carefully. "And tomorrow, we'll start making sure they stay that way." "Over my dead body," Marcus growled, stepping forward. That's when Richard smiled, not warmly, but with the quiet certainty of a man who'd just seen his opponent reveal a fatal weakness. "Marcus," he said calmly, "I own 3 security companies, 2 private investigation firms, and I have the personal phone numbers of half the judges in this city. But more importantly, I have something you don't." "What's that?" Marcus sneered. "The moral high ground and unlimited resources to defend it." The color drained from Marcus's face. Richard continued, each word precise and unshakable. "By tomorrow morning, I'll know everything about you. Where you work, where you live, what you owe, who you owe it to. I'll know every complaint, every ticket, every time you've been late on rent. And if I find out you've laid so much as a finger on either of them, I will make sure you spend the rest of your life wondering when the other shoe is going to drop." Marcus stood there, swaying, trying to process the reality of a man who meant every word. Behind the dumpster, Sarah wept not from fear, but from something new. Hope. For the first time in months, someone was standing between her and the storm. But even as relief bloomed, she knew this wasn't over. Men like Marcus didn't vanish. They waited, plotted, returned. After a long silence, Marcus took a shaky step back. "This isn't over," he muttered, though the words lacked conviction. "Sarah belongs with me. Emma belongs with me. You can't just steal someone's family." "I'm not stealing anyone," Richard replied. "I'm giving them a choice they haven't had in a long time." "She'll come back," Marcus insisted, voice desperate. "She always does. She needs me." She can't make it on her own. Richard's jaw tightened. He'd heard that line before, the manipulator's anthem, dressed as concern. Maybe she said that because you made her believe it was true. I gave her everything, Marcus's voice cracked. I paid her rent, bought groceries, stepped up when Emma's real father walked out. I was there when no one else was. And what did you expect in return? Richard asked quietly. Marcus faltered. Loyalty. Respect. Some appreciation for what I sacrificed. And when you didn't get the gratitude you thought you deserved. Richard let the implication hang. Marcus looked away. I love her. I love Emma. I know I'm not perfect, but I tried. Love doesn't make someone hide in a dumpster, Richard said simply. Love doesn't make a 7-year-old scream for help in a dark alley. She's overreacting. Sarah always overreacts. A mother's fear for her child is never an overreaction. Marcus glanced around the alley as if seeing it for the first time. The shadows, the filth, the sheer degradation of their refuge. His voice softened. I don't want to be the kind of man who scares people. That's not who I meant to be. Then don't be, Richard said. Walk away. Get help. Figure out why the people you claim to love are terrified of you. He paused, then added with quiet finality, and if you can't, you'll discover exactly how much power, unlimited resources, and a clear conscience can bring to bear on someone who threatens innocence. Marcus stared at him, then turned and walked unsteadily toward the street. Over his shoulder, he called, She'll call me. When she gets scared and alone and realizes she can't make it without someone taking care of her, she'll call me. She always does. Then he was gone, leaving only the echo of footsteps and the lingering stench of desperation. Richard waited 5 full minutes before speaking. It's okay. You can come out now. Sarah emerged slowly. Emma's hand clutched tightly in hers. Both were trembling, but now with the aftershock of danger past, not its presence. Is he really gone? Emma whispered. For now, Richard said honestly, kneeling to her level again. But we need to make sure he stays gone, and that means being very smart about what we do next. Sarah's voice was barely audible. Why are you helping us? You don't even know us. Richard was silent for a long moment, memories surfacing like ghosts. Because once, I was 7 years old, he said finally, and I watched my mother hide from someone who claimed to love her, and no one came to help. The words hung in the air, raw and true. Sarah studied his face in the dim light and saw something unexpected. Shared pain. What happened to her? She asked softly. She learned to make herself very small and very quiet, Richard replied. And she taught me to do the same. It took me 20 years to understand that love isn't supposed to feel like walking on broken glass. Emma tugged her mother's sleeve. Mommy, are we really safe now? Sarah looked at Richard. I don't know, baby. I hope so. You are, Richard said firmly. But safe and free are two different things. Safe is what we accomplish tonight. Free is what we work towards starting tomorrow. Sarah frowned. I don't understand. Richard stood, brushing dust from his expensive suit, a jarring contrast to the alley's grime. Safe means Marcus can't reach you tonight. Free means he can never reach you again. Legally, physically, emotionally. Safe is a hotel room and security guards. Free is restraining orders, new beginnings, and a system that actually works for people like you. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. That sounds impossible. You don't know how the system works for people like me. I'm nobody. I have no money, no connections. You have me now, Richard interrupted gently. And I have all of those things. She whispered the question that had haunted her since childhood. Why? He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, with the weight of old wounds and hard-won wisdom, he said, Because the 7-year-old boy who watched his mother suffer is still here, and he's been waiting 30 years for the chance to be the help that never came. Emma looked up at him, eyes bright with something Sarah hadn't seen in months. Hope, are you going to be our hero? She asked, with childlike directness. Richard smiled this time, warmly. I'm going to try to be someone who helps you become your own heroes. What does that mean? It means we're going to make sure you and your mom never have to hide again. And more importantly, we're going to make sure you never have to be afraid of someone who claims to love you. As they walked toward the streetlight, Sarah touched Richard's arm. I need you to know what you did tonight, standing up to Marcus like that. No one has ever done that for us before. They should have, he replied simply. But they didn't. You did. And whatever this costs you, whatever complications it brings, I want you to know you saved us. Not just from Marcus, but from believing we deserved it. As they stepped into the glow of the city, Richard realized this night had changed them all. For Sarah and Emma, it might be the first night in months they'd sleep without fear. For him, it was the moment he finally understood what his wealth and power were truly for. But it was also the beginning of something far bigger. Because Marcus was right about one thing. This wasn't over. It was only just beginning. 3 weeks had passed since that night in the alley, and the world Richard Blackwood once knew, ordered, predictable, insulated by wealth and influence, now felt like a fragile illusion. Standing in his 42nd floor office at Blackwood Tower, he gazed out over Manhattan's glittering skyline, but the view offered no comfort. His reflection in the bulletproof glass revealed a man aged not by time, but by responsibility. The lines around his steel-gray eyes spoke of sleepless nights spent ensuring Sarah and Emma remained safe, of legal documents reviewed until dawn, of conversations with security teams that blurred the line between protection and paranoia. What began as a spontaneous act of compassion had spiraled into something far more complex. A legal, emotional, and psychological labyrinth with no clear exit. The intercom buzzed, snapping him from his thoughts. Mr. Blackwood, Mrs. Mills is here, with the legal briefing, his assistant announced. Her tone clipped and professional. Send her in, Richard replied, straightening his tie with a practiced motion that belied the tension coiled in his shoulders. Janet Mills entered with the quiet authority of someone who'd spent decades dismantling opponents in courtrooms. At 55, her silver hair was pulled into a severe bun, her posture rigid, her eyes sharp enough to dissect a lie before it fully formed. But today, even her legendary composure seemed strained. She placed a thick manila folder on his mahogany desk, with a thud that echoed through the cavernous room. The restraining order was granted. She began without preamble, her voice low and urgent. But Marcus hired representation. Very good representation. Richard turned from the window slowly, his expression darkening like storm clouds gathering over the Hudson. How good are we talking? Davidson, Stone and Associates, Janet said, pulling out letterheads stamped with the firm's prestigious logo. They specialize in high-stakes family law custody battles, asset concealment, reputation management. Their retainer alone costs more than most people earn in 2 years, and they don't take hopeless cases. Richard's jaw tightened. Marcus Rivera had been unemployed for 3 months, surviving on odd construction gigs and credit card debt. There was no way he could afford elite legal firepower. Exactly what I thought, Janet continued, sliding a financial investigation report across the desk. So I dug deeper. Turns out Marcus has a benefactor. Someone's covering his legal fees, rent, even therapy sessions he's never attended. Richard's mind raced. Run a full background, he ordered, his voice dropping into the cold, precise register that had once dismantled billion-dollar mergers. Bank accounts, credit history, family ties, recent transactions. I want to know who's funding this and why. Janet nodded, already scribbling notes. Already underway. But Richard, there's more. She spread out annotated legal briefs across the desk, each marked with colored tabs like a battlefield map. Their strategy is sophisticated and deeply personal. They're painting Sarah as mentally unstable. Richard's hands clenched. That's absurd. On the surface, yes, Janet conceded. But they've fabricated medical records, witness statements from people Sarah's never met, even falsified employment reviews claiming she was erratic and unreliable. They're arguing the dumpster incident was a calculated performance to trap a wealthy benefactor. The words landed like blows. Richard had seen corporate smear campaigns before, but this was different, targeted, intimate, designed to exploit Sarah's vulnerability. "And Emma?" he asked, dreading the answer. "They're pushing for supervised visitation rights," Janet said grimly. "Marcus claims an established father figure role after 18 months with them. The judge will consider Emma's age, she's only 5, but continuity of care weighs heavily in custody rulings." Richard's mind clicked into legal mode. He has no biological or legal claim. "Doesn't matter," Janet countered. "His lawyers are framing stability as more important than blood ties. They'll argue that severing Emma's relationship with Marcus would cause more trauma than maintaining supervised contact." She paused, then added the worst part. "They're also raising questions about you." A chill ran down Richard's spine. What kind of questions? Why would a billionaire, with zero prior connection, suddenly insert himself so deeply into a domestic dispute? "They're implying your motives aren't purely altruistic, suggesting you might have an unhealthy interest in vulnerable women and children." Richard sank into his leather chair, the irony bitter in his mouth. He was being cast as the very predator he'd spent his life refusing to become. "How's Sarah holding up?" he asked quietly. "She's terrified," Janet admitted. "Guilt-ridden too. Keeps saying she should disappear with Emma to spare you this character assassination." "That's not an option," Richard said firmly. "Running validates their narrative. Emma needs stability, not life on the run." Janet studied him carefully, then set down her pen. "Richard, I've worked for you 8 years. I've seen you negotiate hostile takeovers with less emotional investment than this case. Why? Why are you risking your reputation, your peace, your entire public image for 2 strangers?" The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken history. Richard stood and walked to a bookshelf, retrieving a small framed photo, a woman with gentle eyes, and Sarah's same warm smile, holding a young boy who mirrored Richard's features. "Her name was Elizabeth Patterson," he said softly. "My mother. She had a brother who died in a car accident, leaving behind a teenage daughter with nowhere to go. My father refused to take her in, said we couldn't afford it, though we were wealthy. My mother never forgave herself for that." He turned to face Janet, his voice thick with decades of buried regret. "That niece was Sarah's grandmother. My mother spent years trying to reconnect, writing letters she never sent. When she died 4 years ago, I found boxes of them addressed to Sarah, tracking her life from afar, too afraid to reach out." He opened a locked desk drawer and pulled out a bundle of handwritten letters tied with faded ribbon. "When I found them in that alley, I realized I had a chance to do what my mother couldn't, to be there for family when they needed help. Sarah and Emma, they're the only family I have left." Janet's expression softened, but her legal instincts remained sharp. "That's a powerful reason," she said carefully. "But there's something you're still not telling me." Before Richard could respond, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and went pale. "Marcus was arrested this morning," she said, her voice tight. "He broke into your penthouse." Richard's blood ran cold. "Was anyone hurt?" "No. Your security system caught him within minutes." "But Richard, he wasn't there to steal. He had photos, professional surveillance shots of Sarah and Emma, dated over 3 years. Richard's mind reeled. Janet showed him samples. Sarah pregnant, walking to work, moving apartments, each image time-stamped, cataloged like evidence. "Someone's been watching them for years," Richard whispered. "The question is, who and why did Marcus have access to this?" Janet leaned forward, her voice low. "I think Marcus stumbled into something much bigger than a custody fight. Someone's been orchestrating this entire situation, using him as a pawn." The implications crashed over Richard like a wave. Had their meeting in the alley been staged? Was his intervention part of someone else's design? Meanwhile, 20 blocks away, Sarah sat at her kitchen table, helping Emma trace the letter D in her alphabet workbook. At 5, Emma was bright and curious, but today her attention kept drifting to the window. "Mommy, Why was that man shouting outside our building last night? She asked innocently. Sarah's stomach knotted. Despite the restraining order, Marcus had been lingering nearby, pacing the sidewalk just beyond legal boundaries, his presence a constant shadow. Sometimes grown-ups get confused when they're upset, Sarah explained gently, smoothing Emma's hair. Like when you get frustrated with your puzzle. Emma offered, trying to make sense of adult chaos through childhood logic. Sarah nodded, her heart breaking at the resilience in her daughter's voice. They'd memorized safety protocols like bedtime stories, safe places to run, trusted adults to find, words to say if a stranger approached. The phone rang, shattering the fragile calm. Detective Santos. Mrs. Patterson, come to the station immediately. We've recovered materials that change everything. An hour later, Sarah sat in the precinct's interview room, staring at the same surveillance photos Richard had seen. These span 3 years, the detective explained. Marcus had them when he broke into Mr. Blackwood's residence. He's been watching me all this time? Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. Not Marcus, Detective Santos corrected. Our tech team analyzed the metadata. These were taken by at least 4 professional-grade cameras equipment used by high-end private investigators. Marcus couldn't afford this. The truth dawned slowly, horribly. Someone with deep resources had been monitoring her life for years. And 18 months ago, right when she met Marcus, the surveillance intensified. You think someone arranged for us to meet? Sarah asked, her voice barely audible. I think someone's been manipulating your life for a very long time, the detective confirmed. The question is whether their goal was to help you or control you. That evening, Richard arrived for his usual visit, but Sarah watched him differently now, searching his face for hidden knowledge. The police showed me the photos, she said carefully over coffee. Professional surveillance going back 3 years. Someone with serious money has been watching us. Richard's cup paused halfway to his lips. For a fraction of a second, she saw something flicker in his eyes. Recognition. My mother hired investigators 4 years ago, he admitted quietly. After her cancer diagnosis, she wanted to reconnect with her brother's family. They tracked you to New York, documented your life. When she died, I inherited those files. Sarah felt the room tilt. So you've known about me for 4 years? I knew where you were, Richard said, his voice pained. But I didn't know about Marcus. I didn't know you were in danger until that night in the alley. But the photos the police found go back 3 years, Sarah pressed. If your mother died 4 years ago, then someone else has been watching you too, Richard finished grimly. The comfortable routine of their evenings evaporated, replaced by a new, unsettling truth. They were both pieces in a game, neither understood. What if Marcus isn't the real threat? Sarah whispered. What if he's just another pawn? Before Richard could answer, both their phones buzzed with emergency alerts. Richard read his screen and went pale. Janet's been in an accident. It's serious. He stood abruptly. Double-check all security protocols. Don't open the door for anyone except verified police. Do you think it was really an accident? Sarah asked, her voice tight with dread. Richard's expression was grim. At this point, nothing about our situation has been accidental. Someone's been orchestrating events for years, and I think it's accelerating toward a conclusion we can't see. As he left, Sarah realized they'd moved far beyond a simple custody battle. Someone powerful had been pulling strings in her life for years, and now that manipulation was escalating, threatening everyone she loved. But for the first time, she wasn't just a victim waiting to be rescued. She was a mother fighting for her child. And she was beginning to suspect the real enemy wasn't the man shouting outside her window, but someone who'd been helping her all along. The call came at 4:17 a.m., jolting Sarah from the first deep sleep she'd managed in weeks. It's Richard, his voice crackled through the phone. Janet's awake. She says she knows who's behind the surveillance, and we're all in immediate danger. An hour later, they sat beside Janet's hospital bed in the ICU. Bandages wrapped her head. Bruises marred her face. But her eyes burned with urgent clarity. Richard, do you remember the Meridian Pharmaceuticals case? She asked weakly. Recognition flashed across Richard's face. The fraud case. We exposed falsified drug trials. People died. Thomas Meridian, the CEO we helped convict, was sentenced to 15 years. Janet continued. He's also Marcus Rivera's uncle. Sarah's blood turned to ice. Meridian's been orchestrating this from federal prison, Janet revealed. Using Marcus as an unwitting tool for revenge against you, Richard. You and Emma were the bait in a trap years in the making. She pulled a tablet from under her pillow, displaying financial records and communication logs. Meridian's network funded Marcus's legal defense, the surveillance, even engineered your chance meeting at that bar. He's been feeding Marcus carefully selected information to fuel his paranoia. Photos of you talking to other men, presented as proof you were being unfaithful. Richard's financial help, twisted into evidence you were being bought. Richard paced the room, fury simmering beneath his calm exterior. So the surveillance wasn't to help Marcus track Sarah, it was to build a paper trail, making me look like a stalker. Exactly, Janet confirmed. Marcus breaking into your penthouse forced Meridian to accelerate his timeline. The hit and run wasn't random, it was an attempt to silence me before I connected the dots. Sarah's mind reeled. How long has he been planning this? Since the day Richard testified against him 6 years ago, Janet said. Meridian swore he'd destroy Richard's life the same way Richard destroyed his. Everyone thought it was prison bravado, but he's a strategist. He researched your family connection, found Sarah, and weaponized her life against you. Richard stopped pacing, his face haunted. His goal was to turn me into the very thing I've spent my life avoiding, a controlling, manipulative billionaire, using wealth to dominate vulnerable people. And I was the bait, Sarah whispered, nausea rising in her throat. You and Emma were the leverage, Janet confirmed gently. Meridian counted on Richard's protective instincts to drive him toward actions that could be twisted into proof of obsession. The irony was devastating. They'd been accused of the very crimes Meridian was committing. But it wasn't true, Sarah insisted, though doubt flickered in her voice. Truth doesn't matter if the narrative is convincing, Janet said sadly. Meridian spent 6 years building a case in the court of public opinion, with documents, witnesses, expert testimony. He wanted to destroy Richard psychologically by making him become his own worst nightmare. Richard turned to the window, his reflection showing a man grappling with 6 years of invisible warfare. So everything Marcus did, the threats, the control, the psychological abuse, it was all part of Meridian's plan? Marcus's vulnerabilities made him the perfect weapon, Janet explained. Meridian studied his psychology during prison visits, knew exactly which triggers would turn affection into obsession. Every time Marcus felt insecure, Meridian's people fed him evidence you were slipping away. Sarah thought of Marcus's warnings about Richard, his insistence something was off. He hadn't been entirely wrong, he'd just identified the wrong villain. Marcus was a victim too, she realized aloud. A victim who became dangerous because he was being manipulated, Janet confirmed. Meridian knew Marcus's reactions would escalate, driving you to seek Richard's protection, which would then make Richard appear controlling to outsiders. Where does this leave us now? Richard asked, his voice heavy with exhaustion. Meridian's plan is unraveling, Janet said with quiet triumph. Marcus going rogue exposed the surveillance network years early. My survival means his attempt to eliminate witnesses failed. For the first time in 6 years, we're ahead of him. But he's still dangerous, Sarah said, her protective instincts flaring. And Marcus still believes Richard is the enemy. Actually, that's been resolved. Janet managed a weak smile. Marcus was rearrested this morning on federal charges related to his uncle's conspiracy. The FBI's been building a case against Meridian's prison network for months. Marcus's actions provided the final evidence. He's not getting out this time, and he's finally learning how he's been used. Relief and sorrow warred in Sarah's chest. So it's over? The immediate threat is neutralized, Janet confirmed. But Meridian still has 9 years on his original sentence, and now faces additional charges for conspiracy and witness intimidation. He won't stop until one of you is broken or dead. Richard sank back into his chair, the weight of 6 years of unseen battle pressing down on him. I never even knew I was under attack. That's what made his plan so cruel, Janet said softly. You couldn't defend against what you couldn't see, and every protective measure you took could be twisted to support his narrative. She reached for his hand, her grip surprisingly strong despite her injuries. But Richard, you need to understand something. The way you've handled this proves you're not the man Meridian tried to paint you as. You protected Sarah and Emma while consistently giving Sarah the power to make her own choices. You stepped back when she questioned your motives. You prioritized their autonomy over your own emotional needs. Sarah listened, her earlier doubts dissolving. Richard, I owe you an apology, she said, her voice steady with newfound conviction. Your suspicions were reasonable, but they were based on lies someone else spent years planting. I should have trusted my instincts about who you really are. Just then, Emma stirred in the hospital chair, blinking sleepily. Mommy, is Miss Janet going to be okay? Yes, sweetheart, Sarah said, pulling her close. Emma turned to Richard, her gaze direct and clear. Uncle Richard, are the scary people going to leave us alone now? Richard knelt to her level, his expression honest but gentle. The main scary person is going to jail for a very long time, Emma. And Marcus won't bother you anymore either. Good, Emma said simply. I didn't like being scared all the time. Then, with the devastating directness only a child can wield. Uncle Richard, are you going to stay with us now that the scary people are gone? Richard looked at Sarah, a question in his eyes that went beyond logistics. Before Sarah could answer, he spoke softly. I was hoping we could figure out what comes next, together as a family. Emma's eyes lit up. What does that mean? It means we get to choose how we want to be a family, Richard explained warmly. We can live in different places and visit often, or live closer so we see each other every day. What matters is that we're connected and take care of each other. Will you still come have coffee with Mommy every day? Emma asked hopefully. If your mommy wants me to, and if you want me to, then yes, Richard said, smiling. Sarah felt tears, well, not of fear, but of hope. Daily coffee sounds perfect, she whispered. In that hospital room, surrounded by the aftermath of a 6-year conspiracy, something new began to take root. Not just safety, but belonging. Not just survival, but the possibility of a future built on trust, not manipulation. And for the first time in years, Sarah allowed herself to believe it might actually last. As they strolled through the bustling farmers' market, Emma darting between stalls with wide-eyed delight, Richard carrying a basket of fresh fruit, and Sarah breathing in the crisp morning air. They moved not as strangers bound by crisis, but as a family woven together by choice, resilience, and quiet understanding. The past still lingered in small ways. Emma sometimes startled at loud voices, Sarah still double-checked locks before bed, and Richard occasionally paused mid-sentence when someone raised their tone too sharply. But those echoes no longer controlled them. They had learned to listen to their fears without obeying them. Later that afternoon, over homemade lemonade on Sarah's sunlit balcony, Richard handed her a thick envelope. It's not what you think, he said gently. Inside were legal documents, not for custody, not for financial support, but a formal family trust established in Emma's name, with Sarah as primary trustee and Richard as co-trustee. This isn't about control, he explained. It's about ensuring Emma has options, college, travel, safety nets, without ever having to depend on anyone's charity or goodwill. You decide how and when it's used. Always. Sarah looked at him, tears glistening, but her smile steady. You really have changed, haven't you? I'm trying, he said simply. Every day. 6 months turned into a year. Emma started first grade with confidence, made friends without hesitation, and proudly told her teacher, her family has 3 people who love each other. Sarah launched a small graphic design business from home, her portfolio growing with every client who saw her talent, not her past. Richard, meanwhile, shifted his foundation's focus to support survivors of psychological abuse, funding shelters, legal aid, and trauma-informed therapy programs. He even testified before Congress about the invisible wounds of coercive control, wounds no camera could capture, but that shaped lives just the same. One evening, as autumn returned and the city glowed amber once more, the three of them revisited the alley, not to relive the fear, but to reclaim it. Emma placed a small painted rock near the dumpster, a butterfly with the words, "We are free," in bright blue letters. "So no one forgets," she said. Sarah took Richard's hand, not out of need, but companionship. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not being the hero I thought I needed, but the partner I didn't know I deserved." He squeezed her hand. "Thank you for letting me be part of your healing." And in that quiet moment, beneath the hum of the city that had once felt so indifferent, they stood not as billionaire, victim, or child, but as three souls who had faced the darkness together and chosen light.